how would you define what soul loss is? How does it happen? And what is it that actually gets lost? I think for a lot of people, first, if they don't understand what the soul is, you can't understand what's lost. But I think a lot of people would have a hard time conceiving of something of our soul getting lost.
Yeah, so first we have to explain soul loss. It usually occurs, when some traumatic event happens in someone's life. And so it can be mental, emotional stuff. It can be physical things as well. So a major car accident. And so basically what you can think of is if you had this major accident where you thought, I'm going to die, the soul ejects from the body. It's to kind of to avoid pain, to not be in there. It says, I'm getting out of this body. I'm not going to experience that, and leaves the body. But then you don't die, and then that part of your soul doesn't know how to come back. And so there needs help for it to come back. And so it's kind of, the way I see it is like a silver string with like a string pulling the soul out, and it's like tethering like a balloon above them because it's not back in the body. And that takes, a guide or some kind of intention to bring that part back into that person. And so soul loss can happen through addictions. It can be happen from, doing psychedelics when you shouldn't, and it blows you out of your mind, and you don't know how to get back into your body. So soul loss can happen through, like rape, abuse, bad relationships, so abusive relationships. So anytime where you're scared to be in your body, you wish you weren't alive. If you're afraid to be in it, where you don't feel included as well. So I find that, if you're in a family where you have that event where you go to Thanksgiving dinner and everybody's picking on you and you feel like the black sheep, there's part of you that wants to leave. And so it does. And so we'll see fragments of that soul. So the analogy I have for that situation is think of a beautiful vase and it kind of gets chipped. And a little chip of that vase is left behind in that scene. And you'll know if this is happening to you in your life because you can't get past that event. For some reason, it's like Groundhog's Day. Part of you is reliving that event over and over and over again. So even though it might have been 20, 30 years ago, you're like that Thanksgiving event, and you're still hanging on to it. And you're like, why can't I get over it? Or that relationship, or you're still afraid of cars because of that car accident. And it's like, I can't move forward in life. So there's part of you that's stuck. And so bringing that part of you back allows you to be fully in the present. And so that's when you can identify if someone is suffering from soul loss, is because they're not fully present and their mind is going back of woulda, shoulda, coulda, I want to change the past, why did that happen? And they're stuck.
You're using an interesting term, which of course I understand, but to expand on it for the listeners, you're talking about bringing that part of you back. What is it that you're bringing back when you're doing a soul recovery process? When we're bringing something back, it almost sounds like an object you can pick up. Is there a way you can describe what it is that you're actually bringing back?
Yeah, I guess you could talk about it in like quantum energy. It could be like an energetic part of them, so there would be a part of the non-physical them that is still stuck in that dimension or that past. How
do you find something like that? What does it look like to you?
Okay, well, this could be different for everybody, but it actually looks like them. And so oftentimes when I go back, I see the person as their 6-year-old self or as their 12-year-old self. And I see them reenacting that scene again and again and again. They're stuck there. So it's actually like a vision to me. So I do a lot of, seeing. So that's my gift, is to see things. So I will see them in that spot, and I can see that they're stuck. And oftentimes, when I go with a client and we revisit those parts of their life that are painful, I'll scan the room to see. And oftentimes, it's like I tell them, we're watching a movie, and instead of looking at just you or being inside your body, I want you to step outside your body and look at that person, and now look at yourself and look around the room. And oftentimes we find a little version of themselves hiding behind the couch, or hovering in the ceiling, or on the rooftop, or outside the home, or running away from the scene, or flying from the scene. So they're not actually looking at themselves, but a part of them that is like an energetic code of them. So it's like I wouldn't say ghost, but it's like a transparent version of them that's still present in that space.
Yeah. When I'm conducting particularly deep shamanic ceremonies, there's times when people get so far out of their body that their body starts to die, and I have to go get them and bring them back, which is often baffling to people. But I'm always tracking them using my clairvoyance, and it's very much like what you say. I see, for example, I will follow them. Usually they're in the astral dimension when this happens because the medicine takes them up to a very high vibration. And so what I'll actually see is what looks like a luminous light body versus like when I'm looking at you now, I see your skin and your eyes.
Yes.
But if I was looking at you in the astral dimension, I would see what looks like you made out of light.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to use the word ghost, but it's like that apparition. It's like you see through them. But yes.
Yeah. And there's I have to track them in my light body. So I'm actually doing what I call traveling in spirit body, but I actually have to go get them. Sometimes I have to take them by the hand. Some of them times they don't want to come back because they don't want to be here on the earth plane. So I might have to grab them and hold on to them and then bring them down into their body. And sometimes I can breathe them into me. I can use my intention and my breath and draw them into my lungs and then blow them back into their body. And it's like the body will even jump sometimes, like it turns back on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they usually get upset at me and say, "Why did you do that? I was having so much fun." I just, they tell me all about how beautiful it was out there. I say, "Yeah, well, I'm doing that because the purpose here is to heal, not to continue to escape the healing."
Right.
But, it brings me back to Edward Edinger's definition of consciousness. Consciousness, and I'm paraphrasing, consciousness is a psychic substance produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites. And so, because I've known this definition for many, many years, when I look at a soul, I see the psychic substance, because really the soul is consciousness within the individual. And so I really do feel that consciousness is a tangible reality, just like the ether or the atmosphere. Like you can see steam coming out of a kettle, and you could say, that's water at a different vibrational rate.
Right.
And you could grab some steam. You could take a plastic bag and scoop it up in the bag, and it would be there until it turned into water again.
Right.
So it's when I work in this particular type of instance, but even when I'm doing soul recovery more along the lines that you do, I'm actually seeing the little boy or the little girl or the broken adult, but I can actually go touch them, and there's really something there.
Yeah, it's actually like a tangible, because you're working in that dimension. So I will actually have my client reach and touch them themselves and hug them or kiss them and give them love. It's what they really need, and feeling calm and to bring them back, because they left because they were in a chaotic environment. So they're not going to come back if the environment's still chaotic.
Yeah.
And so the person has to be in that relaxed state to invite love back in.
Yeah. Another thing that I've experienced, I'm sure you have too, I just wanted to bring it up because you didn't mention it. One of the things that I see as a common cause of soul loss is when people don't like a part of their body.
Yeah, I didn't go through my entire list of things that I wanted to share, but yes, 100%. And so when a person tells me, "Oh, I don't like my thighs," or "I don't like my tummy," or "I don't like my butt," you're actually experiencing soul loss in there, because you're not loving that part of you. So you'll find pockets of emptiness in those areas of your body, which allows, it's a different podcast, but allows for entity possession, because there's space in there that's not being used. And so it's like, oh, another soul could enter your body.
Yeah.
And so when we come back and say, hey, I'm going to treat my body as if I would a sick child. If you don't like something about your body, if your child was sick, you wouldn't spank them and slap them around and say, get over it. You'd pick them up and you'd hug them and you'd kiss them and you nurture them. That's the same thing that person needs to do to their body, and say, I love my thighs, I love my belly, and what is it, body? What do you need to be nurtured so that you heal? Because you seems to be holding on to weight or holding on to water or inflamed. And then they have that kind of conversation with their body versus, I hate this, I wish I could just cut it out. And oftentimes that's what they do. They go to a surgeon, just try to cut it out and escape the work that really needs to be done and heal their body.
Yeah, I would say the most common area I've seen soul loss in is the breasts. I've had a long string of women in my career that just didn't like their breasts, often after giving birth to one or two or three children. and their breasts lose their perkiness, and they get saggy, and women start really having a disgust or a disdain of their own breasts. They don't feel attractive or sexy, and so they actually pull their soul out of their chest and often start shopping for a plastic surgeon because they feel, I think the way a man relies on his strength and maybe the sharpness of his mind to identify himself, women are more oriented toward their physical beauty in general as a stereotypical type thing. So if a woman feels unhappy with her breasts or any part of her body, but the breasts are very common, I've seen that they just withdraw from it.
Yeah.
And you'll often see them standing with their shoulders rounded, and it's as though they're trying to hide that part of themselves.
Yeah. So when you see also disease in the body, that can be a sign of soul loss too. So again, a woman's breast, if she's having those issues, it could lead to breast cancer.
Yeah, and it has in cases I've worked with. So the point I wanted to bring up is that I think it's important for people to understand that, the soul is really a spiritual being living in and inhabiting a body, but it's also the consciousness that is directing the body. Mm-hmm. So if a person doesn't love themselves, the cells of the body feel like a child that is not getting loved, and they behave very similar. A child that's not loved can be very sickly because of it and psychologically ill. And I think that's also one of the reasons for cancer, is that when a person is in this divided state in their relationship with their body, the parts that they're not loving begin to feel isolated. And so the cells, I think, start reacting to this trauma, this psychological trauma, and it's as though they themselves aren't part of the family. And so I think in this state of, I would call it sadness, the cells don't have the consciousness of the individual to direct the cellular functions. And I perceive shamanically or spiritually that the manifestation of the diseased tissue is like a physical image of the psychic energy that's involved.
Yeah, and when the soul is gone, soul is responsible for our vitality, and so life force energy is connected to our soul. So when we lose that vitality, we lose our health, and so we see the diminishing of our body from that soul loss.
Yeah.
So oftentimes people feel more energized when we bring those fragments back, because they're like, oh my gosh, I feel like, it's not just their energetic levels, but all their senses become more heightened. They say, I can see better, I can hear better, I can taste more, I can feel more, and so they even tell me they have a sense of walking taller and feeling more in their body, more coordinated. Mm-hmm. So it's like they become fully inhabited to their body, and it's like they were gone for a while, and they're like, whoa, I can't believe I was missing all this about life. I also find when soul loss occurs, we find people gain weight. And I find that this is an interesting thing I've discovered in my own practice, is that when soul loss occurs, the soul is what anchors the body on the earth plane. And when the soul starts to leave, the body actually starts holding on to physical weight to feel like they're anchoring on the plane, because they feel like they're leaving. And the body, and the soul's like, I'm not ready, but part of them's out. So the body starts to hold on to more and more weight to ground them. And I find when that soul fragments come back, the body goes back to its ideal body weight. So that's really a neat thing to see when people say, I've tried everything, I'm eating right, I'm exercising, I'm sleeping right, all these things, but those parts of them are lost. And when we bring those parts back, all of a sudden it's like that missing piece, and their body just goes back to the right shape that their body's supposed to have. Mm-hmm.
I've also seen cases where people had, for example, numbness in fingers or toes or body parts that there wasn't a neurological or orthopedic explanation for, but all of a sudden people will say things like, I don't know why, but I can feel my fingers now. I haven't felt my fingers in years. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's happened several times for me is one of the first comments people will make is, wow, the colors are so bright. Like they'll look at the wall, or a picture on the wall, and it's like they're seeing it for the first time.
Yes.
I've always found that very fascinating.
Yes. That's one of the first things is their eyesight, but then they'll eat something and go, wow, this just tastes so incredibly good. What's different about this? And it's like now they're experiencing it fully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Also, sometimes we find with soul loss, we also talk about women who can't get pregnant. If they've had, could be that they don't like their tummy or whatever, and they're putting negative energy in towards their uterus. But it can also be caused from a miscarriage or an abortion where that soul was in their body and it's not fully separated from them. And so that soul energetically is still in them. And so until that soul has been energetically removed, they will not get pregnant. And so I've seen where I've helped them energetically remove these souls from their uterus, and the next thing you know, they're pregnant.
That's interesting. I haven't run across that.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing because, it's like, why can't I get pregnant? Why can't? And then when we go in, I'm like, there's these souls still there, and part of it is because they denied that experience, whether it be, a miscarriage or an abortion. They just pretend it didn't happen, and so they're denying that life. And that life came into their life for a reason. So they have to acknowledge that soul. And part of the work is to get clear with that and say, hey, why did you come to me? What was your purpose? And once that soul feels heard, then it's free to go. But it's almost like it's locked onto them until they've been acknowledged.
Must make for quite a challenging experience for the souls that are in wombs that never do get acknowledged.
Right, and they're stuck, so they can't move on. So they're this just kind of like a ghost. Yeah, it's a limbo, and it's like, I would like to move on, but I can't. And so you're helping the person, but you're also helping that unborn fetus.
Yeah, it's very powerful stuff. My next question is, what is soul recovery, and what is it that you're recovering? We've kind of addressed that. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so that's, soul recovery is done with the intention of going in there. And so it's done in like in a meditative state where you're guiding your client to find those fragments of them that are missing. And not everything in your life is a soul loss. We go in together and look, because sometimes it could just be, in fact, sometimes where you think it might be soul loss, it's actually the soul gets stronger. And instead of leaving, they actually ground themselves in the body. And I'm like, wow, no, that wasn't soul loss at all. In fact, that made you stronger. And so I have to really discern what's really happening. Did the soul actually go deeper into the body, or did they actually lose part of themselves there? And so, that's part of the work, is to acknowledge what's actually happening with the soul and what's going on in that actual experience. And so
that's an interesting phenomenon. I've never come across that. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more. What does that look like?
So let's say a person's father beat them. Oftentimes we think, oh, they might have suffered soul loss. That's the first thing we think, because we didn't want to be there, didn't want to be beat by daddy. But when you go back and look, you might find that, in fact, that child rose up and became more powerful and said, you know what, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to learn how to work out and get stronger, or make myself safer. And so a woman who's maybe saw their child die, you might say there might be soul loss there because their baby died, but they might actually grounded themselves and says, I'm going to take more responsibility for my life so that this doesn't happen to another of my children. So you see them ground themselves deeper, and it actually can. You see women who maybe were on drugs and something happened to their child, and now it's like that moment is when they decide to become sober and they never touch the drug again. So they didn't have soul loss; they actually got soul strength, soul gain, as I would say.
Yeah.
So the soul loss,
they become more conscious.
More conscious. So oftentimes there was soul loss in their past, and instead of that particular event creating more soul loss, they actually gain part of their soul back, because they're like, I need to be present. And so that's really what's happening.
Yeah, that's a very interesting concept. I will have to kind of keep my inner vision tuned to see what I see with that concept in mind. I probably wouldn't have ever noticed it, because I'm always looking for what's missing, not what's there.
Yeah.
But I can see, actually it makes me think of myself, because, my childhood was pretty tough and a lot of abuse. So I had that mindset. You know, my mindset was, I'm going to fight back.
Right.
And I just kind of just became even more intense.
That's right.
You know, and I didn't even think I had a way out, so I stayed in.
Yeah. So then, you know, when you were younger, you might have had some soul loss, but you regained it from another future event. And then you said, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm not going to be the victim. I'm moving forward and I'm going to become something so this doesn't happen. So yeah, you'd had a soul gain.